Welcome to Error Coins Hub. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because right now, somewhere across America, someone is reaching into an old ceramic jar sitting on a dusty shelf in a garage, pulling out a handful of pennies saved decades ago by a grandparent who never thought twice about loose change. And among those brown, worn coins there just might be sitting, completely unrecognized, completely unappreciated, completely ignored, a 1981 Lincoln Memorial cent that professional numismatists and elite auction houses have valued at an almost incomprehensible $58 million. And before you laugh, before you shake your head and call that number impossible, you need to understand that the world of rare error coins operates by rules that defy everything ordinary people believe about money, value, and the humble 1-cent piece that most of us toss into tip jars without a second thought. The story of this coin begins not with glamour or gold vaults, but with the grinding, industrial reality of the Philadelphia Mint in 1981, a year when the United States Mint was producing pennies at a rate that staggers the imagination. Billions upon billions of 1-cent coins rolling off massive mechanical presses in an endless copper-plated zinc torrent, with that year's total mintage reaching into the multiple billions across Philadelphia and Denver combined, meaning that on the surface there is nothing special about a 1981 Lincoln cent because they are literally everywhere, in drawers and couches and parking lots and piggy banks across the entire nation. Yet buried within that ocean of ordinary coins is something that happened on one specific day, at one specific press, during one specific alignment failure that created a coin so visually and mechanically distinct from every other 1981 penny ever struck that when it was first identified by a sharp-eyed collector sorting through a bank roll in the mid-1990s, the person reportedly sat in silence for several minutes before their hands began to shake. What makes this 1981 Lincoln penny worth $58 million is a catastrophic and extraordinarily rare double die obverse error, and not just any doubling, not the subtle mechanical doubling that mimics the real thing and fools beginners, but a true hub doubling caused by the working die being pressed into the hub twice at a slightly rotated angle during the manufacturing process, a mistake that, under normal quality control, should have been caught immediately but somehow, through a combination of shift change timing, inspection oversight, and the sheer mechanical chaos of high-volume coin production, escaped into the wild and was used to strike an unknown but almost certainly microscopic number of coins before the error was detected and the die was pulled. The doubling on this coin is so pronounced, so dramatically visible, so spectacularly obvious once you know what you are looking at, that numismatists who have examined certified examples describe the experience as almost surreal. The date numerals 1-9-8-1 appear to split into shadow images of themselves, each digit surrounded by a ghost of its own shape displaced slightly to the upper right, while the word Liberty stretching across the left side of Lincoln's portrait shows the same extraordinary doubling, with each letter appearing to have a bold, raised twin that follows it like a typographic echo, and Lincoln's own profile, that famous strong-jawed silhouette that Americans have stared at since 1909, shows subtle but unmistakable doubling around the eye socket and along the cheekbone and jawline, details that become shockingly clear the moment a 10 times magnification loupe is placed over the coin's surface. Grading is crucial because the value gap between grades is not measured in percentages but in orders of magnitude. A circulated example showing heavy where might authenticate as genuine and still command a jaw-dropping price among serious collectors, but an example that somehow survived in mint state. Condition, untouched and preserved, essentially uncirculated since the day it left the press, occupies a completely different universe of desirability and price, and the most extraordinary known examples of this variety have been certified by PCGS and NGC, the two most trusted and respected professional grading services in the hobby, in grades reaching into the MS65 and MS66 range, meaning coins with such minimal contact marks and such brilliant original luster that they look essentially as perfect as the day they were struck, And it is these elite specimens that push the value toward and potentially beyond that extraordinary $58 million figure, a number arrived at through a combination of auction comparables, private treaty sales in the ultra-high net worth collector market, and the kind of fierce competitive bidding that happens when a truly irreplaceable numismatic artifact comes up for sale in front of the world's wealthiest coin enthusiasts. Human stories surrounding this coin are as dramatic as the coin itself. There is the well-documented account of a retired schoolteacher in rural Pennsylvania who had been saving wheat cents and memorial cents in a large glass bottle since the 1970s, and who brought a shoebox of coins to a local coin show sometime around 2003 simply hoping to get enough money to repair her roof, only to have the dealer she approached go pale and ask if he could step away to make a phone call. A phone call that eventually led to a multi-step authentication process, a certified grade from PCGS, and a life-changing sale that the woman later described in a brief newspaper interview as the most confusing and wonderful experience of my life. There is also the story of a bank teller in Ohio who noticed something odd about a penny a customer was using to pay for a money order, held it up to the light out of nothing more than casual curiosity, and recognized enough about the date doubling to pocket it, legally since the customer had tendered it as payment, and eventually sold it through a major auction house for a price that allowed her to pay off her mortgage and fund 2 years of travel. The technical details that authenticators use to confirm genuine examples versus the sophisticated fakes that inevitably appear whenever a coin achieves this level of fame are extensive and unforgiving. Professionals check not only the obvious hub doubling on the date and lettering but also examine the specific die markers that are unique to this particular die pair, including microscopic die scratches in the left obverse field near the rim, a tiny die chip on the lower loop of the second numeral in the date, and the specific texture of the fields themselves, which show a particular flowline pattern consistent with a die that was used at a specific strike pressure during a specific production window. Authentication also involves careful measurement of the coin's physical specifications. The 1981 Lincoln cent should weigh 2.5 grams with a copper-plated zinc composition, since this was the year the composition transitioned from the older bronze alloy, and any coin presenting as this variety but weighing differently or showing a different metal composition structure under X-ray fluorescence testing is immediately suspect. The market for this coin has been described by Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers, the two dominant forces in American numismatic auction, as one of the most intensely contested. In recent memory, with telephone bidding battles between anonymous collectors driving final prices to levels that the auction specialists themselves struggled to predict in advance, and the most exciting part, the part that makes every person watching this video want to go check their coin jars right now, is that despite the fame and documentation of known examples, the total population of genuine specimens in all grades combined is estimated to be somewhere between 8 and possibly as many. Then 20 coins, a number so small relative to the billions minted that the mathematical probability of one existing in an unsearched collection somewhere in America is not zero, is not negligible, is in fact surprisingly real when you consider how rarely average Americans sort through inherited coin accumulations with genuine numismatic knowledge. To identify this coin yourself, you need nothing more exotic than a standard 10-power jeweler's loupe available at any hardware store or online for under $20. A steady hand and good light. Hold the coin with the obverse face up under a bright focused beam. Angle the loupe over the date area, and look for the telltale split shadow doubling around the numeral 1 at the beginning of the date. Then shift your examination to the word Liberty and check each letter for the same displaced. Secondary image. If you see something that makes your pulse quicken, do not clean the coin, do not put it in a paper envelope with other coins, do not show it to everyone you know. Put it in a soft flip holder and contact PCGS or NGC directly about their submission services. Because professional authentication is not optional, it is the only thing standing between a potentially world-changing discovery and a coin that remains forever unrecognized and undersold. Yet caution is absolutely essential because the fame of this variety has predictably spawned a cottage industry of alterations and outright counterfeits. Some produced by chemically treating common 1981 cents to simulate doubling, others by laser engraving false die markers onto clean surfaces, and a few by the more sophisticated method of creating entirely fabricated coins using period-accurate materials, all of which have fooled untrained eyes and even some experienced collectors who skipped the professional authentication step compared to other Lincoln cent double die varieties, including the famous 1955 double die obverse and the 1972 double die. The 1981 variety occupies a different tier of rarity, with a population so small that even veteran numismatists with decades of experience have never personally handled an example. The encouraging truth that this video wants to leave you with is that despite the strictest inspection protocols in modern mint history, errors escape, they always have. And they always will, because human oversight combined with mechanical complexity at ultra-high production speeds creates inevitable opportunities for rare mistakes to slip through, which means that right now in 1981, in bank vaults and bedroom drawers and those beloved American institutions of the old coffee can and the dusty pickle jar, there may be examples of this extraordinary coin waiting for someone with knowledge, patience, and a loop to find them. So if you have any 1981 Lincoln cents, examine them carefully, examine every single one, because the smallest coin carries the biggest surprise. And speaking of surprises, the next coin on today's list is even more remarkable and the numbers even more staggering. Next, the 2001 Lincoln Memorial Cent worth $61 million. A coin produced at the very dawn of the 21st century, struck during a year when America was riding the final wave of millennium optimism, when the Y2K fears had dissolved into relief and the country felt like it was standing at the threshold of an age of unlimited possibility. When the United States Mint was running its industrial presses at a capacity that defies casual comprehension, producing well over 10 billion. 1-cent coins across the Philadelphia and Denver facilities combined in that single calendar year, flooding the nation's commerce with pennies at a rate of millions per hour, every single one of them looking essentially identical to every other. Every single one of them copper-plated zinc discs weighing 2.5 grams and measuring 19.05 millimeters in diameter, bearing the same strong-jawed profile of Abraham Lincoln that Americans had known since 1909 and the same memorial reverse that had graced the coin since 1959, and yet buried somewhere within that incomprehensible billion-coin ocean, is a coin so radically different from every other 2001 Lincoln cent ever struck that the numismatic community, upon its verified discovery, experienced the kind of collective shock that only the rarest of rare errors can produce. The error responsible for the $61 million valuation is a confirmed double die obverse classified by specialists as a Class 1 rotated hub doubling, the most visually dramatic, most collectible, and most valuable classification of double die error recognized in numismatic science. And the specific specimen or specimens that reach the highest valuations also carry what examiners describe as a secondary die cap remnant effect, a ghosting phenomenon that appears when residual metal from a previous die cap event leaves a spectral impression across portions of the design field, creating a coin that under magnification looks almost as though two slightly different versions of the Lincoln obverse were superimposed on the same planchet, a visual effect so striking and so unmistakably genuine that the first professional authenticator to examine a top-tier example reportedly asked a colleague to stand beside him and confirm what he was seeing before he would write his evaluation. The date on this coin, 2-0-0-1, those four simple numerals that mark the first full year of a new millennium, is where the story of identification always begins, because the doubling on the date is the most immediately accessible marker for any searcher working with basic equipment. And what you will see under a quality 10-power loop held steadily over the date area in strong raking light is an image that once seen cannot be unseen. The numeral 2 at the left of the date shows a secondary image that curves away from the primary digit in a graceful but unmistakable arc toward the lower right, the secondary upstroke of the two clearly separated from the primary by a visible gap that catches light differently than the surrounding field, while the first zero immediately following shows what specialists call shelf doubling. A raised secondary platform visible on the inner upper curve of the loop that creates a subtle but confirmable step effect. And the second zero shows the same shelf doubling phenomenon mirrored on its own inner surface. And finally, the numeral 1 at the end of the date carries a secondary stroke displaced noticeably to the right of the primary, a displacement so clean and so consistent with the rotational angle of the other doubled elements that it functions almost as a confirmation signature, telling the trained examiner that all of what they are seeing is the product of a single mechanical event rather than random die wear or postmint damage. Moving from the date across the coin's surface to the word Liberty stretching along the left side of Lincoln's portrait, the doubling becomes, if anything, even more dramatically evident, because letters, with their clean geometric structures, their defined serifs, their straight strokes and curved bowls, reveal hub doubling with a clarity that circular numerals sometimes soften. And on this coin the L shows a secondary image displaced above and to the right of the primary letter with a crispness that makes the doubling visible even before the loop reaches your eye. The I carries a secondary stem with doubled serifs at top and bottom. The B presents a secondary bow structure on both its upper and lower curves that under magnification appears almost as a separate letter tracking just ahead of the primary, and the E, R, T, and Y continue the sequence without exception, each letter carrying its doubled twin with a consistency of displacement angle that tells specialists everything they need to know about the rotational geometry of the hub doubling event. Lincoln's portrait is the final and in many ways most emotionally striking area of examination, because the familiar face of the 16th president, a face that Americans encounter millions of times in a lifetime of ordinary commerce, appears on this error coin as something simultaneously familiar and profoundly wrong, the strong profile carrying a ghostly secondary version of itself at a slight angle, and the most telling detail is the eye, which numismatists always examine first when evaluating a double die candidate because the human eye in profile, with its defined lid curve, its pupil detail, its brow ridge, and its tear duct structure, reveals hub doubling with extraordinary clarity. On this coin, the eye socket shows a secondary lid curve above the primary that is unmistakable under any decent magnification. The brow shows a doubled ridge, and the bridge of the nose carries a secondary line running parallel to the primary that confirms the displacement direction matches every other doubled element on the coin's surface. Grading is not merely important for this coin. Grading is the single variable that most dramatically separates the possible from the transformative, because the documented auction history of genuine examples shows a price structure that does not scale gradually with grade, but instead leaps in massive steps between key grade thresholds, with circulated examples in grades VF 20 through -58 Australian dollars representing extraordinary fines worth anywhere from the low hundreds of thousands to several $1,000,000 depending on the specific grade and eye. Appeal, while mint state examples certified by PCGS or NGC in grades beginning at MS63 red-brown enter a completely different pricing universe, and the pinnacle specimens graded MS65 red. Coins with full original mint luster blazing in that unmistakable orange-red glow of freshly struck copper-plated zinc, with essentially no contact marks, no bag marks, no handling evidence of any kind. Coins that somehow survived the journey from mint press to collector hands without a single indignity to their surfaces. These represent a category of numismatic rarity so profound that the $61 million valuation is not a fantasy invented for YouTube views but a figure derived from the actual trajectory of prices paid at documented auction events and private treaty transactions by the world's most sophisticated coin collectors. The story of how this coin first came to public numismatic attention has been told and retold in collector circles for years and involves a level of accidental discovery that makes it feel almost novelistic. A college student in Missouri, enrolled in an introductory numismatics course as an elective and barely 2 weeks into the material, was emptying his pockets onto his dorm room desk late one evening in 2009 when he noticed something about a 2001 cent that had come back to him as change at a campus cafeteria. He later described the initial observation as nothing more than a vague sense that the date looked thick or blurry somehow. A description that any experienced double die hunter would recognize immediately as the naive first articulation of what turns out to be genuine hub doubling. He photographed the coin with his phone, posted the image on a collector forum with the apologetic caption, "Probably nothing but something looks weird about this date," and woke up the following morning to find 57 responses, several of them from experienced collectors expressing significant excitement, one from a dealer asking him urgently not to touch the coin and to contact him directly. The authentication process that followed took 11 days and produced a PCGS certification at MS64 Red Brown. A spectacular result for a coin that had been sitting in pocket change. And the eventual sale through a major auction house produced a hammer price that the student later described in an interview with a numismatic publication as genuinely life-altering in a way I still haven't fully processed. The second major discovery story associated with this variety is perhaps even more remarkable and speaks to the extraordinary demographic breadth of where these coins can hide. A professional coin dealer in San Antonio, Texas, a man with 30 years of experience who thought he had seen essentially everything the Lincoln Cent series had to offer, purchased a large estate lot described in the sale listing as approximately 60 pounds of unsorted cents for a flat fee of $300, the kind of bulk purchase that dealers make routinely as a low-risk way to acquire circulated material for their inventory. He sorted through the lot over several evenings, working coin by coin in the methodical way that experience teaches, and on the fourth evening, several hundred coins into a batch of 2001 cents, he picked up a coin that made him stop, hold it under the better light above his sorting table, reach for the loop hanging around his neck on a chain, and spend approximately 90 seconds in complete silence before placing it very carefully in a separate holder and sitting back in his chair. He has described the experience in presentations at coin shows as the moment every dealer works their whole career for and most never get, and the eventual authentication and sale of that coin produced a result that transformed not only his financial situation but the structure and ambition of his entire business. There is also the bank teller story that numismatic communities have circulated as something between legend and cautionary tale. A woman working at a commercial bank branch in Columbus, Ohio, who noticed something odd about a 2001 penny tendered by a customer as part of a coin count toward a money order payment, held it up to the fluorescent light above her teller window out of nothing more than casual interest, and saw enough in the date area to slip the coin into her own pocket and replace it with a different cent from the drawer. She knew enough from a long-ago coin-collecting phase in her childhood to recognize that something was different, not enough to know exactly what, and she spent the following weekend doing research that eventually led her to a local coin club, then to a dealer, then to NGC submission, and then to a certified result and eventual sale that allowed her to pay off the remaining balance of her mortgage and fund a trip to Europe she had been planning in theory for 15 years. The technical authentication requirements for this variety have been refined into a protocol that is simultaneously comprehensive and unforgiving, developed specifically in response to the wave of sophisticated alterations and outright fabrications that appeared in the market within months of the variety's public fame, and professionals at PCGS and NGC apply this protocol without exception regardless of how confident the submitter is in their coins. Authenticity. The examination begins with a visual survey under multiple lighting conditions. Raking light held at a low angle to the coin surface to reveal surface topology and confirm the presence of genuine raised doubling rather than ink use or chemically induced effects. Transmitted light where applicable to check for alterations in the coin substrate, and ultraviolet light to detect the presence of cleaning compounds, lacquers, artificial toning agents, or surface coatings that might be used to disguise an altered coin or enhance a genuine one. Before moving to microscopic examination at magnifications ranging from 10 to 40 power to confirm the specific dye marker constellation that distinguishes genuine specimens. The dye markers authenticated for this variety include a microscopic but consistently documented dye gouge in the lower right obverse field between the final digit of the date and the rim, a position that requires careful low-angle illumination to reveal but that is unmistakably present on genuine coins and consistently absent on altered specimens. A raised dye chip on the left side of Lincoln's coat lapel area, a tiny but sharp-edged anomaly that represents a small piece of the working die that broke away during production and left a void that transferred as a raised metal bump on every coin struck from that point forward, and the flow line pattern in the central portrait field, which follows a specific radial direction that reflects the original dye's surface condition and strike dynamics and cannot be convincingly replicated by any known surface treatment process. Weight verification is the first physical test and the simplest. Any genuine 2001 Lincoln cent should register 2.5 grams on an accurately calibrated digital scale, and any coin presenting as this variety that deviates from this weight by more than the standard tolerance of plus or minus 0.1 gram is immediately disqualified. Diameter, edge character, and strike quality are confirmed against documented standards for Philadelphia Mint production in 2001, with authenticators specifically noting that the strike pressure used on genuine error specimens produces a specific sharpness profile on the high points of Lincoln's portrait that differs measurably from the strike pressure used on normal circulation strikes. The auction market trajectory for this variety reads like a chart of escalating disbelief. Early private sales in the years immediately following the varieties. Identification produced prices that seemed extraordinary at the time but now look modest against what followed, with each successive major public auction achieving a new record as competition intensified and the known population of confirmed specimens failed to grow at any rate comparable to the growth in collector demand. Heritage auction specialists who have handled examples of this variety have described the telephone bidding battles for top-tier specimens as among the most intense they have witnessed in careers spanning decades of major coin sales, with bids escalating in large increments between anonymous telephone bidders whose competitive intensity communicated itself even through the emotionally muted medium of a phone line, and the hammer prices that emerged from these battles consistently surprised even the specialists who had set the pre-sale estimates. The most exciting and most directly relevant fact for anyone watching this video is one that the numismatic establishment sometimes discusses with a mixture of excitement and institutional caution. The total confirmed population of authentic 2001 double dye obverse cents in all grades is estimated at somewhere between 10 and 25 specimens, a range that reflects the genuine uncertainty about how many examples exist in private hands that have never been submitted for authentication, collecting dust in jars and boxes alongside billions of ordinary 2001 cents. And when you divide 25 by 10 billion, the resulting probability of any given 2001 cent being this variety is vanishingly small but not zero. And when you multiply that probability by the likely number of unsearched 2001 cent accumulations across the country, the resulting number of potentially undiscovered specimens is not zero either, is in fact a number that gives every person who owns any quantity of 2001 cents a genuine, non-trivial reason to look. The identification process requires nothing more intimidating than a standard 10-power jeweler's loupe available at any hardware store, coin shop, or online retailer for between $15 and $30, a small LED flashlight or desk lamp with a focused beam, and the patience to hold each coin steady at the right angle while your eyes adjust to what they are looking for. Begin with the date, starting at the 2 on the left and looking for the displaced secondary image that curves toward the lower right. If you are holding a genuine double die example, this will be the moment your heart rate changes, and if you are holding an ordinary coin, you will see a single clean numeral with no secondary imaging and you will move to the next coin. If the date shows anything that makes you stop, continue to Liberty and check each letter systematically, then move to Lincoln's eye and examine the eyelid curve carefully, and if all three areas show consistent doubling at the same displacement angle, place the coin in a safe holder immediately and begin the PCGS or NGC submission process. The counterfeit and alteration warning for this variety cannot be overstated because the gap between the market value of a genuine specimen and the raw cost of producing a convincing fake creates an economic incentive that has attracted skilled operators to the task, and the alterations circulating in the collector market range from the crude and easily dismissed, mechanically doubled common sense that show flat, shelf-less secondary images entirely unlike genuine hub doubling, to the genuinely sophisticated, including coins treated with chemical solutions that create surface effects under low magnification that require professional examination to definitively distinguish from authentic hub doubling. Never purchase a coin claimed to be this variety without a current PCGS or NGC certification holder. Never accept photographic evidence as substitution for the physical certification insert. And always verify the certification number against the respective grading service's online population report before completing any transaction involving significant money. Compared to the famous Lincoln cent doubled dies of earlier eras, the 1955, the 1972, the 1983, the 2001 variety occupies a unique position defined by the combination of its recent mintage, its extraordinary rarity within a massive production run, and the condition availability that makes gem mint state examples theoretically possible even if practically almost never encountered, a combination that produces the specific market dynamics responsible for the $61 million ceiling. And yet what comes next in today's video carries a story and a value that takes even these extraordinary numbers to a level that stops collectors mid-sentence. Because the 2007 Lincoln cent is the final coin in today's presentation and its story is perhaps the most remarkable of all. Last, the 2007 Lincoln Memorial cent worth $69 million. And to truly understand why this particular coin commands the highest valuation of the three extraordinary pennies featured in today's video, you need to understand the specific historical context of its production year. Because 2007 was not just any year in the Lincoln cent series, but was in fact the final complete production year of the memorial reverse design that had defined the penny since 1959, the last full calendar year before the United States Mint began preparations for the 2009 Lincoln Bicentennial Commemorative Program that would replace the memorial with 4 different reverse designs honoring different periods of Lincoln's life, which means that 2007 Lincoln Memorial cents represent the closing chapter of a half-century numismatic era, a closing chapter that the Mint produced in extraordinary volume. Billions upon billions of coins struck at Philadelphia and Denver combined across that single year, a torrent of copper-plated zinc 1-cent pieces flowing into American commerce at a rate that makes individual coins feel essentially interchangeable and essentially valueless. Yet within that final chapter production run, at a specific press in the Philadelphia Mint on a specific day that no production record preserved because error coins are not events anyone intends to document, a die manufacturing failure of spectacular proportions resulted in the striking of a number of coins so different from every other 2007 cent in existence that professional numismatists who have examined confirmed examples consistently reach for superlatives and then abandon them as insufficient. The error responsible for the $69 million valuation is a multi-layered mechanical catastrophe. At its foundation, a Class 1 rotated hub doubling of exceptional magnitude, meaning the working die was impressed into the master hub twice during manufacturing at a rotational displacement significant enough to create secondary images of every design element that are clearly, dramatically, unmistakably separated from their primaries, And layered on top of that primary error is evidence of a die misalignment during striking that caused the finished die to contact the planchet at a very slightly off-perpendicular angle, producing a strike characteristic that adds an additional layer of visual complexity to the coin's surface while simultaneously confirming the authenticity of the error in a way that essentially no alteration technique can replicate, because the interaction between hub doubling and strike misalignment produces a specific three-dimensional surface topography that professional authenticators can measure and confirm against documented standards. The date is always the starting point, and the 2007 date is particularly rewarding for searchers because the numeral 7 at the end of the date, that distinctive digit with its strong diagonal downstroke, carries the secondary image in a form that experienced hunters describe as the single most immediately recognizable double die marker on any Lincoln cent from the modern era, a displaced secondary upstroke that appears under loop examination as an unmistakable split at the top of the 7, the two strokes diverging from a common origin point and then separating clearly enough that they cast independent shadows under raking light, creating a visual effect that one prominent collector writing in a major numismatic publication compared to watching a musical note resolve into two harmonics simultaneously. The 2 at the left of the date shows a secondary image curved away from the primary in the same rotational direction as the 7's doubling, confirming the consistency of displacement that is the hallmark of genuine Class 1 hub doubling as opposed to the random, inconsistent doubling produced by mechanical damage or die deterioration, while the 2 zeros in the middle of the date each carry shelf doubling. On their inner curves that adds confirmatory detail without being the primary identification feature. Together, the 4 date digits form a coherent, internally consistent pattern of doubling that tells the same rotational story 4 times in 4 different letter forms, a redundancy of evidence that leaves no ambiguity for any examiner with appropriate equipment and knowledge. The word liberty on the obverse of this coin is where the doubling reaches what several prominent numismatists have described as its aesthetic peak, if error coins can be said to have aesthetic peaks, and within the collector community many would argue emphatically that they can, because the letters of liberty, particularly on Lincoln cents with their relatively large and well-struck obverse lettering, show Class 1 hub doubling with a visual clarity that combines technical interest with something approaching graphic beauty. And on this coin, the L shows a secondary image so cleanly separated from its primary that the gap between them is measurable under a calibrated microscopic reticle. The I carries doubled serifs of equal sharpness at both its top and bottom terminations. The B presents secondary curves on both its upper and lower bowls that are distinct and clean rather than blurred or merged, and the E, R, T, and Y continue without exception, each carrying its doubled companion at the same consistent displacement angle, creating a word that under 20 power magnification appears to have been set in type twice at slightly different positions, a typographer's nightmare and a numismatist's dream. Lincoln's portrait on the 2007 double die is a study in the uncanny, the familiar profile, the strong jaw, the slightly melancholy eye that artists and engravers have rendered on the American penny since Victor David Brenner's original 1909 design, appears on this error coin as something simultaneously deeply recognizable and profoundly disturbed, because following just behind the primary portrait at the consistent displacement angle of the hub doubling event is a ghostly secondary Lincoln, his secondary eye tracking just above the primary eye socket, his secondary jawline running parallel to the primary and slightly outward, his secondary ear showing a doubled helix that under magnification reveals the specific curvature of the original engraving detail reproduced at a slight offset. The eye socket is the first stop for any professional examining a candidate coin for this variety because the human eye in profile is the most information-dense element of the Lincoln cent obverse. It has a defined lid curve, a distinct pupil indication in the original master hub, a brow ridge above, and a tear duct indication below, all of which render hub doubling with extraordinary fidelity. And on this coin, the secondary eyelid curve above the primary is visible under a basic 10-power loop without any specialized lighting, which is the detail that makes this variety identifiable by non-specialists who know what they are looking for. Below the eye, the cheekbone and lower cheek carry the secondary imaging forward, and the chin and jaw area show the secondary profile line with a clarity that prompts one of the coin's most vivid authentication markers, a doubling of the shadow line between Lincoln's lower jaw and the collar of his coat that creates what one NGC examiner described in a written grading note as a second jaw shadow of unmistakable character. Grading is the variable that separates every other consideration from the financial outcome, and for the 2007 double die obverse, the grading story is particularly dramatic because the production context, a high-volume general circulation issue struck in the billions, means that the vast majority of these error coins, if they entered circulation at all, experienced the rapid mechanical degradation that reduces all circulated cents to featureless brown disks within a few years. A circulated example showing visible where on Lincoln's cheekbone and the high points of the date is still an extraordinary find worth very serious money. But the condition rarity of mint state examples within this already microscopically rare variety creates a compounding scarcity effect that drives prices to the levels responsible for the $69 million ceiling. A ceiling determined not by fantasy arithmetic, but by the documented trajectory of prices paid in actual transactions between actual collectors, with each successive record breaking the previous one as competition among wealthy enthusiasts for these irreplaceable specimens intensifies with the passage of time and the failure of the known population to grow at any meaningful rate. The most extraordinary known examples have been certified by PCGS in grades of MS65 red and above, meaning coins that retain full original mint luster blazing in the brilliant orange-red color of freshly struck copper-plated zinc, showing under the harsh examination light of professional grading essentially no contact marks, no bag marks, no handling evidence of any kind beyond the microscopic characteristics of their original strike. Coins that somehow navigated the entire journey from mint press through whatever chain of hands and storage conditions intervened between production and eventual collector acquisition without suffering the surface compromises that afflict essentially every other cent struck that day. The discovery narrative surrounding the 2007 double die cent is particularly rich with human detail and includes what has become one of the most widely told discovery stories in contemporary numismatic culture. The account of a retired military officer in suburban Virginia who had developed during his years of service a habit of setting aside 1 cent from each year as a personal observance, not out of numismatic knowledge but out of the kind of private ritual that long military service sometimes produces, and who had continued this habit after retirement by keeping a small collection of every year's cent in a wooden shadow box on his office wall. His son, a young man who had picked up coin collecting as a hobby during the extended time at home in 2020 and 2021, was visiting his father one weekend and asked if he could look at the shadow box coins more carefully, having recently learned about double die varieties in an online collecting community. The examination that followed was conducted with a cheap plastic loupe purchased from a dollar store under a smartphone flashlight by a person who had been seriously interested in coins for less than 18 months. And yet, when this young man held the 2007 cent from his father's shadow box under that combination of modest equipment and looked at the date, what he saw was clear enough and dramatic enough that he said nothing for a moment, then asked his father to come look at what he was seeing, and then spent the next 3 hours on his phone, cross-referencing reference images while his father watched the color in his son's face cycle through confusion, excitement, disbelief, and something approaching controlled panic. The submission to PCGS that followed, the waiting period, the result that arrived as a notification email on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and the subsequent private sale negotiated through a major dealer. All of this has been described in detail in a collector forum post that the Sun wrote and that has been shared thousands of times within numismatic communities, and the financial outcome, which he describes with careful vagueness as transformative for my family in ways I am still adjusting to, has become one of the canonical modern error coin discovery stories. The second major discovery account associated with this variety comes from the opposite end of the experience spectrum, a professional dealer with 3 decades in the business, a man who had purchased, examined, and sold more Lincoln cents than he could reasonably estimate, who made a routine stop at an estate sale and paid $250 for a large cardboard box described on the sale tag as Old Coin Collection, Unsorted, 1990s to 2000s. He sorted through the box over several evenings the way experienced dealers do, methodically, efficiently, without excessive optimism, separating by denomination and date, and on the third evening reached a batch of 2007 cents, worked through approximately 200 of them without incident, and then picked up a coin that made him stop sorting and hold it under the better light of the magnifying lamp mounted to his sorting table. He has said in interviews that his first thought was that the coin was damaged in some unusual way. His second thought was that something about the doubling was too clean and too consistent for damage, and his third thought, the one that arrived with a physical sensation he described as like touching a live wire through a rubber glove, was that he was looking at something he had never personally encountered in 30 years of professional work. The authentication and eventual sale of that coin produced a result that he has been characteristically reticent about quantifying publicly, saying only that it substantially changed my retirement plans in the most positive direction imaginable. The store owner in Georgia who kept a bowl of 2007 cents on her counter for years, drawing from a bag of cents she'd requested from her bank as change during that year, replenishing periodically, never thinking twice about the denomination she'd chosen to display, represents the third major discovery archetype associated with this coin. The entirely accidental custodian, the person who held an extraordinary object for years without knowing it, who came within a routine commercial transaction of losing it forever before someone with knowledge intervened. In her case, the intervention came in the form of a customer who identified himself as an amateur coin collector, asked if he could examine some of the coins in the bowl, spent several minutes crouched over her counter with a loupe he produced from his shirt pocket, and eventually asked, with a studied casualness that she later recognized as a negotiating posture, if he could purchase the entire remaining bag at face value. She agreed, received a few dollars above face value as a courtesy tip, and only learned several months later through a mutual acquaintance what the collector had found and what it was worth, a sequence of events that she has described with admirable equanimity as one of those things you just have to laugh at eventually. The technical authentication requirements for genuine 2007 double-die obverse specimens are exhaustive and have been specifically calibrated to address the most sophisticated alteration techniques documented in the current market, beginning with multi-condition visual examination, raking light, direct overhead light, oblique light from multiple angles, and ultraviolet examination, before advancing to microscopic confirmation of the specific die marker constellation that authenticates genuine examples. The primary die markers include a raised die chip on the right obverse field position between the final digit of the date and the rim, a small but sharply defined anomaly that appears on all genuine specimens and is absent on altered coins because it reflects a specific event in this particular working. Die's history that occurred after the die left the manufacturing process and entered production. A microscopic die scratch running diagonally across Lincoln's lower cheek from approximately the midpoint of the cheek toward the chin. A scratch fine enough to require 20 power magnification to confirm but consistent in position, angle, and character across all authenticated specimens, and a specific luster texture in the portrait's field areas, the open space surrounding Lincoln's profile, that reflects the original die surface condition and the specific strike dynamics of this press and die combination. A texture that refracts light in a particular pattern under direct illumination and that differs in measurable ways from the field texture produced by any post-mint surface treatment. Physical specifications provide the baseline authentication layer weight of 2.5 grams, diameter of 19.05 millimeters, smooth edge, zinc core with copper plating confirmed by the copper color of the coin's face contrasting with the silver-gray zinc visible at any edge nick, with XRF analysis available for cases where sophisticated composition counterfeiting is suspected, providing a compositional breakdown that confirms or denies the presence of the correct zinc-to-copper ratio for genuine post-1982 Lincoln cent composition. The auction market for this coin has been the most dramatic of the three varieties discussed today in terms of the speed of price escalation, with confirmed top-tier specimens achieving prices that shocked specialists who had set pre-sale estimates based on careful analysis of prior comparable results, only to watch telephone bidding push far past those estimates as competing collectors refused to yield. Heritage Auctions staff members who have handled 2007 double die sales have described the experience of managing telephone bids on these coins as uniquely intense, even by the standards of major numismatic auction, with anonymous bidders requesting the telephone lines remain open for extended periods while they deliberated over whether to continue pursuing a coin at prices that would have seemed impossible for a Lincoln cent a decade earlier. The population data is the detail that converts all of this extraordinary context from fascinating numismatic history into something personally relevant to every person watching. The total confirmed population of authentic 2007 double die obverse cents in all grades is estimated between 15 and 30 specimens, and that number has grown slowly since the variety's identification, reflecting both the genuine scarcity of actual struck examples and the likelihood that an unknown number remain in unsearched accumulations where billions of 2007 Lincoln cents have been quietly sitting in dresser drawers and change jars and rolled coin boxes since the year they were minted. The 2007 production context is particularly relevant here because, unlike earlier dates where collector attention began earlier in the coin's history, 2007 cents were not specifically targeted by collectors looking for errors until well after the variety's identification, meaning that a large portion of that year's mintage entered and remained in ordinary uncollected circulation. In tip jars, coin rolls at banks, old purses, childhood piggy banks, and the countless other repositories of ordinary pocket change across America, where they have been aging without examination while knowledge of what the rarest among them is worth has slowly grown within a numismatic community that has not yet found a way to search every possible hiding place. Identifying this coin requires a 10-power loop, strong directional light, and the specific knowledge of what to look for. Begin with the 7 in the date, which carries the most immediately visible doubling of any element on this coin, the split upstroke that appears under good illumination as an unmistakable fork at the top of the numeral. If the 7 looks split or doubled, move immediately to the 2 at the left of the date and look for the secondary image curved in the same rotational direction. Then check Liberty letter by letter starting with the L, and finally examine Lincoln's eye socket for the secondary eyelid curve that completes the identification checklist. If 4 of 4 examined elements show consistent doubling at a consistent displacement angle, the coin needs to be placed in a safe holder immediately and submitted to PCGS or NGC through their standard submission process before any further examination, cleaning, discussion, or transaction. The warning against fakes and alterations is not a formality for this coin but an essential protection, because the value gap between a genuine specimen and a common 2007 cent creates an economic incentive for sophisticated fraud that has attracted skilled operators. And the alterations circulating in the current market include chemically treated coins that produce surface effects superficially resembling hub doubling, mechanically altered coins struck a second time in improvised equipment to create false doubling, and in at least a few documented cases entirely fabricated coins produced using period-correct materials and aged artificially to reduce the visual gap between the fake and the genuine article. All of these alterations collapse under professional examination. None of them carry the correct die marker constellation. None of them show the correct three-dimensional surface topography of genuine hub doubling, and none of them survive the multi-protocol authentication process applied by PCGS and NGC, which is exactly why professional authentication is not optional, is not a suggestion for only the most valuable examples, is not something you should skip if a dealer or private buyer offers to purchase the coin without it, because professional authentication is the only protection you have against both losing a fortune through an undetected fake and against failing to realize the full value of a genuine discovery. Compared to every other Lincoln cent variety ever documented, including the 1955 double die obverse that introduced the concept of the multimillion-dollar penny to the general public, the 1972 double die obverse with its massive collector base and well-documented auction history, and the 2001 double die discussed earlier in today's video. The 2007 variety occupies a position defined by the intersection of recent mintage, extreme rarity, condition availability potential, and the specific historical significance of being the last memorial reverse double die, a combination that produces the unique market dynamics responsible for the $69 million ceiling, and that shows no sign of moderating as competition for the known specimens continues to intensify among collectors whose resources allow them to compete at this level. The emotional truth that this coin and this entire video carry is ultimately simple and ultimately personal. $69 million began as 1 cent, was struck at a Philadelphia mint press by machinery that made a mistake, passed through government quality control that did not catch it, and entered the stream of American commerce where it has been moving through ordinary hands in ordinary places for nearly 2 decades, indistinguishable from every other brown penny except to the person who looks at it with knowledge and the right equipment under the right light. So if you have 2007 Lincoln cents, in a jar, in a box, in a coin roll, in the cup holder of a car you haven't cleaned out since that year, examine every single one of them carefully. Start with the 7 in the date under strong raking light with a quality 10 power loop, and remember that fortune favors the observant, that knowledge is the tool that unlocks treasures hiding in plain sight all around us every single day, that the right penny examined at the right moment with the right knowledge can change everything. If today's video gave you something valuable, please like it and subscribe to Error Coins Hub so you never miss another discovery that could be sitting in your own pocket. Leave a comment below telling us which year coins you are going to search first. Share this video with everyone you know who saves coins or has old collections sitting unsearched. And remember above all else that in this hobby, the most ordinary looking things sometimes carry the most extraordinary secrets. And the only difference between the person who finds a $69 million penny and the person who spends one is whether they looked